Bonny was an Irish-American pirate whose brief period of marauding in the Caribbean of the 18th century enshrined her in legend. Along with her fellow crew member Mary Read, they both fought against not only persecution against females at the time period, but also pirates, as her and Mary Read were known as the only two female pirates in the Western world. In today's time, she is the inspiration for many TV show, games, and stories. But back in the 18th century, she attracted a lot of attention from the authorities, press, and society at whole, due to her daring and unconventional lifestyle. Ann Bonny's legacy in many ways outtravels her name. Even though her years of pirateering were short, only 2 years, she has gone down in history as a pirate queen. The fact that she was a female pirate at a time period where women were frowned upon for even stepping out of societal roles gained a lot of notoriety and legacy. She was a very skilled pirate and a very skilled fighter, but many only remember her due to the mystery surrounding her disappearance. Most of Ann Bonny's life is known from the volume, A General History of Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates, which was released in 1724, written by Captain Charles Johnson, who many scholars believe is a pseudonym for writer Daniel Defoe. And the book is considered highly speculative, so please take anything from her life as with a grain of salt. Ann Bonny's maiden name was Ann Cormac, and she was believed to be born in 1698 near Cork, Ireland, and moved to Charlestown, now Charleston, South Carolina, USA, at age 13 after her father's infidelity came to light. William Cormac, Ann Bonny's father, famously had an affair with Ann Bonny's mother, who was a servant girl. The news of the affair spread fast through Cork, leading to many of Cormac's clients firing him as their lawyer. Taking Anne and her mother, the former servant girl, the Cormac family moved to Carolina, USA. Sadly though, the family had a bumpy start in their new home, with Anne's mother quickly passing away of typhoid fever when Anne was only 13 years old. During this time period, Cormac was struggling to establish himself as a lawyer in Carolina. Thankfully, he eventually switched to a more profitable merchant business, and due to his ability to buy and sell goods and knowledge of the law, he was quite quickly able to make a substantial fortune, eventually getting himself a townhouse as well as a small plantation. It was recorded that Bonny had fiery red hair and green eyes and was considered a good catch for her time period. At age 13, she supposedly stabbed a servant girl with a knife. I said that very Australian. Okay, I'll say that again. At age 13, she supposedly stabbed a servant girl with a knife. Anne's father tried to betroth her to a local man, but she resisted. Instead, in 1718, she got married to a sailor named James, who was an ex-pirate who chose to give up the life of crime after a pardon from Woodes Rogers, who was the governor of the Bahamas at the time period. After this, Bonny was disowned by her father. William Cormac strongly disapproved of James Bonny as the husband to his daughter, and kicked Anne out of the house, but said she could come back without James. Now there is a very famous story of Bonny setting fire to her father's plantation in retaliation for being disowned, but absolutely no evidence exists to support the story. However, it is known that quite soon after getting married, the new Mr. and Mrs. Bonny moved to New Nassau. Nassau, New Providence Island, was seen as a sanctuary for English pirates. It was even nicknamed the Republic of Pirates. So Ann Bonny really started gaining a notoriety when she sailed off with John Rackham, who was nicknamed Calico Jack because he preferred plain cotton clothing over the often outlandish silks other pirates tend to prefer. Many inhabitants on Nassau either received the king's pardon or just evaded the law. So now that Anne and James Bonny are living on Nassau, and James has received the king's pardon from Governor Woodes Rogers, he is working as a fisherman, but also secretly became an informant from Governor Woodes Rogers. James Bonny would report to Governor Rogers about the pirates in the local area, which resulted in many of these pirates being arrested and hung. Ann Bonny was absolutely disgusted and disliked the work her husband did for Governor Rogers, as she viewed it as disloyal and sneaky. Quickly disheartened by her marriage, she became involved with the pirate John Rackham, also known as Calico Jack. He offered to pay her husband to divorce her, which was a pretty common practice back then, but James refused. Can I just point out the balls on John Rackham? Not only is he in Nassau illegally, he's not received the king's pardon, so he's also there evading the law because they want to hang him. But instead of laying low and staying quiet and only getting involved with those who are not really on the good side of the law, he decided to start an affair with the informant's wife and then openly admit that to the informant and then offer to pay to buy his wife. That takes some serious balls and some not very strong fear of being hanged. 1720, Ann Bonny abandoned her husband and assisted Rackham in commandeering the sloop William from Nassau Harbour, New Providence. Along with a dozen others, the pair began pirating and marauding merchant ships off the coasts of Jamaica. Rackham's decision to have Ann Bonny accompany him was highly unusual, especially considering the woman was considered bad luck to have aboard a ship. He may have been swayed by a fierce disposition as well as apocryphal stories she told. One, for example, is that she claimed she beat a rapist so severely he had to be hospitalized. Against popular belief, it is thought that Ann Bonny did not conceal her gender from her shipmates, but she did disguise herself as a man when participating in armed conflicts. On September 5th, Governor Rogers ordered for the arrest of Rackham and his crew. When he issued the order, he had a list of the suspected crew members. This included Ann Bonny, who at the time's alias was Ann Fulford. Accounts differ when Mary Read joined our crew of ragtag buccaneers. Some sources state that she was a mercenary disguised as a man and was one of the original hijackers of the sloop William in 1720, while others state she could have been aboard a merchant ship that Rackham and his crew had captured. It is said that both Mary Read and Ann Bonny preferred to wear men's clothes while at sea. This doesn't mean they disguised themselves as men, it just means they preferred wearing more masculine clothing. They are also described as wearing handkerchiefs around their head, although which is now commonly thought to be worn by most pirates. This is actually not true and was quite unique for them, or at the very least very underdocumented around male pirates. It was during testimony of their trials that we learned that Ann Bonny and Mary Read only really disguised themselves as men during battle and chose to prefer to fight with pistols, which was seen as very uncouth for women of the time period, as believed women couldn't really man a gun. And while indeed is a romantic suggestion, often presented in popular pirate stories of the modern day, it would really just not be feasible to disguise yourself as a man full-time aboard a ship, especially one as small as the sloop William. They had a fairly decent sized crew and it would have been quite cramped aboard the ship, and it would just not be feasible to disguise yourself as a man full time. Anyway, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself. Before we go into the testimonies, we'll go back into when they're on the seas free as a bird, fighting and flying and voyaging around the ocean. The mixed pirate crew led by Rackham managed to evade authorities as they plundered merchant ships around the Bahamas, covering a wide arc of shipping routes from Bermuda to Hispaniola, taking such unglamorous cargo as tobacco and peppers. It's during this time period that Rackham and Bonny had a child, which is adding to the belief that they did not hide their gender aboard the ship, because it's one thing to hide your entire gender, and another thing to hide that you're 9 months pregnant. This child was abandoned in Cuba, where they'd spent the latter part of her pregnancy. Now, even though they took rather unglamorous cargo, that's not saying that their exploits were not noticed by Governor Woody Rogers, who sent privateer Captain Jonathan Barnett to pursue them. On November 15, 1720, and yes, I did say that she had 2 years of pirateering, but that didn't include the time period where they were getting ready to take the sloop William and also the trial period. So in total, she was a pirate for 2 years, but she was only free as a pirate for around August to November. But anywho, on November 15, 1720, Barnett caught up with the William at Negra Point, Jamaica. Except for Bonny and Read, who fought fiercely against their pursuers, the rest of the crew was way too inebriated to even resist, due to the fact they just got a big catch and were celebrating. The entire crew was captured and brought to the Spanish town of St. Jago de la Vega in Jamaica for trial. Due to their genders, the women will be tried separately from the men on November 28th. But both groups faced the same terrible charge of piracy. Rackham and his crew were quickly found guilty and were hung. A trial notice for Bonny was quickly circulated afterwards. Thankfully, the English and the Spanish were excellent at taking documentation of pirates, so we know a lot about Ann Bonny and Mary Read as well as the entire crew due to the piracy notices that they were charged with. The documentation from this trial reveals some really exciting points about the female pirates, including their past as well as their characters. Bonny and Read were described by one witness, Thomas Dillon, as both profligate, cursing and swearing, and very ready and willing to do anything on board. He also recorded that Bonny was wielding a pistol when apprehended. The reason Ann Bonny and Mary Read were given a much more in detailed trial, as well as given much more documentation about their characters and describing them as persons, is because it was very heavily believed that females could not be pirates. It was not believed females could wield a pistol, or attack with a knife, or do anything really out of violence or malice. So the trial was there to prove that females could actually be pirates, and due to the fact that so many people did not believe this fact, and that is why they had a much more detailed trial with witnesses as well as character studies. A witness named Dorothy Thomas gave the following description of an attack, which left without reasonable doubt that they were willing participants in the crew. The 2 women prisoners at the bar were then aboard the said sloop, and wore men's jackets, wore long trousers, handkerchiefs around their head, and each of them had a pistol and machete in each of their hands. They cursed and swore at the men to kill the deponents, and that they should kill her too, to prevent her from coming against them. And the deponent further said that her reason for knowing and believing that they were women was because of the largeness of their breasts. Another key witness, this time a Frenchman speaking through an interpreter, confirmed the habit of Ann Bonny and Mary Read changing their outfits before going into battle, when they saw any vessel that gave chase or attack. They wore men's clothes, and other times they wore females' clothes. During her trial, Bonny was known for being quite brazen and unrepentant, claiming that she was sorry to see her fellow sailors there, but if they had fought like true men, they would have not been taken. And seeing as the only two people that fought during the final battle were Mary Read and Bonny because the men were drunk and could not fight, is kind of fair her commentary. All parties pleaded not guilty to the charge of piracy, despite the piling evidence against them, and a testimony of witnesses from not just one ship but several ships they had already plundered. No defense was given and they were all found absolutely guilty. When Rackham was sentenced to be hung, Ann Bonny was famously unsympathetic and reported saying that if you had fought like a man, you wouldn't be about to die like a dog, which is a bit harsh. As customary, Rackham's body was hung in a cage and left to rot in open air, as a warning to others who fancied the life of pirating. The reason why Mary Read and Ann Bonny did not get hung straight away like their male counterparts is because they both revealed to the courts that they were pregnant, and it would be against the law for them to be executed while pregnant, as the child did not commit the same sins as the mother. It's believed that sometime after revealing that they were pregnant, that Mary Read sadly passed away during pregnancy. The ending of Ann Bonny, on the other hand, is much more unclear. Many historians believe that either James Bonny or her father had bribed the jailer to let her escape, and if that is the case, Ann Bonny escaped execution, was neither punished nor pardoned for her piracy. Other sources believe that she may have died in childbirth like Mary Read, or had been hung like her male counterparts. But if that was the case, we would have had documentation proving this. Like I said earlier, the Spanish and the English were excellent document keepers, and Mary Read, as well as the many other male counterparts and other pirates that have been executed, all had their names and time of their death documented. The only one you can really not find how they ended is Ann Bonny. It is like she was dropped into prison and then just never mentioned again. And that is why many people believe that she escaped. How she escaped, some historians believe that either her father or James Bonny had bribed the jailer to let her escape, in which case that she would never have been pardoned nor punished for her piracy. If she did escape, like many historians believe, her trial ended with her escape. There is absolutely no records of her life beyond this point. However, her legacy as one of the most famous female pirates throughout all of history continues on. Her story has inspired so many people all over the world, from writers to filmmakers, as well as pirates enthusiasts like myself, who continue to tell her story and keep her spirit alive. Before I finish up, I just want to reiterate that Ann Bonny was a truly amazing pirate, and she defied social norms and fought against the status quo. And even though her time of pirating was very short, she did so much when it came to recognition of female strength. After her trial, it was actually looked into that females not only could be vicious pirating murderers, but they could also lead in other aspects. And even after her trial, there was more evidence of in the area around Jamaica that women were able to do much more physical jobs. And that has been linked in some historians' eyes to Ann Bonny and Mary Read, as became after their trial as something that there's clear that women could actually be fierce. And even if that is not true, it is definitely true that she's inspired so much when it comes to modern day perceptions of pirates. What I'm trying to say is, when you think about pirates and the modern day conception of pirates and the pirates we know about from our stories and pirates from history, please remember that women had a significant role in the history of piracy, and their stories are just as fascinating and exciting as their male counterparts.